Hi again. I'm going to go ahead and read the next chapter. I am Lavina Cumming. This is chapter 13, Princess Perizade. Here we go. We're a little over halfway through the book. Hope you're enjoying it. On rainy days, Lavina and Aggie walked to the mission school beneath a shared umbrella, wrangling over who would hold the handle. I should, since I'm taller, argued Lavina. Reasonably, she felt, because otherwise she had to stoop. No, I should, 'cause it's my grandma's umbrella. She's my aunt, and besides, she told me to keep it during the day. I don't care. I want to hold it now. Aggie made a grab at the umbrella, which wobbled, and chilly raindrops spilled down the backs of both their necks. Lavina tried to control her temper, but it was as hard as reining in one of the stubborn little brown burros on the Bosque Ranch. She wished she could close the umbrella and give Aggie a good poke with it, but young ladies do not do such things, and neither did girls who wanted to arrive at school dry. In Miss Haslam's class, while the wet wraps steamed in the cloakroom, Lavina learned about dictionaries, percentages, and the habits of wild beasts. Her class read from a history book called How Our Grandfathers Lived, and they wrote compositions and copied them over neatly, dripping their pens into the blue-black pools deep inside their inkwells. During indoor recess, Lavina and Susan and Bertie became expert at playing jacks. After school, Lavina and Aggie walked down Vine Street together again. You hold the bottom of the handle, Aggie, and I'll hold higher up. No! They reached home more or less damp. Every evening, Lavina told the story of the day to her doll, who was still nameless. Victoria? She asked as she curled up in bed one night in January. Too old-fashioned, you say? Annabella? Too prissy? Valentina? No? The doll looked back at her with an intelligent expression. She was a true friend who always understood what Lavina meant, even when she spoke Spanish for old time's sake. Today, Lavina said, we studied Indians. We read a book called Wigwam Stories. And then Miss Haslam asked us to write compositions, so I wrote the story of Father and the Apaches, a true story, you know. Do you want to hear it? And the doll did. Father and the Apaches by Lavina Cumming. Long ago, when my father used to drive freight wagons out of Tombstone, the Apaches were on the warpath all across the territory. He camped one night far from town. As usual, he staked out his horses some distance from his wagon, spread his bedroll underneath the wagon, and fell asleep. In the middle of the night, he woke suddenly. Strange noises, he thought, so he lay very still and listened carefully. His horses stamped and snorted, but those were familiar sounds to him, except it sounded like too many horses. Then he heard something else. A twig crackled. A man muttered in a strange language, and he said to himself, Apaches. He lay stiller than ever as he considered what to do. If he tried to escape on foot, they would certainly hear him, and they would probably catch and kill him. They must know that his wagon was there, but they were in great haste, probably escaping the American army in order to hide in Mexico, where the soldiers could not follow. So my father just lay still in the dark under the wagon, and soon he heard them ride away. He waited until it was almost dawn. Then he went to see what had happened. He found all of his horses gone, but the Apaches had left their own tired ones behind. So he harnessed the Apache horses to his freight wagon and went thankfully on his way to Tombstone. Did you like that? Asked Lavina. The doll smiled. So did Miss Haslam. Someday I hope you can meet Father. Maybe if I can go home for the summer. She sighed. Summer seemed hopelessly far away. Esmeralda's a lovely name, she told the doll, and it would go with your emerald eyes. But it's taken. I can't name you after a Gila monster. A few weeks later, Aggie and Lavina came home from school to find a change at 19 Vine Street. The rusty old icebox was gone from Bridget's kitchen, and in its place stood a polished wooden refrigerator. The refrigerator wasn't actually very different from the icebox. It still required large blocks of ice, which were delivered every week by a big, gruff iceman armed with immense tongs. However, The refrigerator was taller, with several individual compartments, and it supposedly kept food colder. "And girls," said Bridget, "for supper we're trying something new entirely." "What is it?" asked Aggie. "A surprise," said Bridget. A clear red substance sparkled in their dessert bowls. Lavina took a spoon and poked it. It quivered. It was not a liquid, but not a solid either. Aggie wrinkled her nose. "Taste it, silly," said her mother. "It's new and it's delicious." They each took a spoonful. "It's called Jello," beamed Cousin Maud. "It's ever so much easier than making gelatin the old way." "I used to boil a calf's foot for hours," said Aunt Agnes. "Ugh, so messy. This all comes in one little box. There are 6 flavors, too. Strawberry, raspberry, cherry, lemon, orange, and chocolate. That's progress for you." "Which one is this?" asked Lavina. "Which flavor would be more correct, Lavina," said Cousin Maud. "Raspberry, it says on the box," called Bridget from the kitchen. "Sure, it's lovely red." Suddenly, Lavina felt starved. She laid down her spoon, and she yearned for the taste of corn, of fresh chilies numbing her tongue, of beef and venison jerky like edible leather stiff with salt, and of Luz's tortillas, warm, freshly toasted on the standard oil-can griddle, better than bread. There were times when Lavina's homesickness became so overpowering that she could almost see it like fog, or feel the weight of it like a suitcase. Some days, rainy Sundays especially, Arizona seemed lost and gone forever. "By the rivers of Babylon we sat down and wept," intoned the minister from the front of the church, and Lavina gazed sadly down at her folded hands. She had never owned a pair of gloves, white or otherwise, before this winter. "Wept when we remembered thee, O Zion." Tears as sharp as salt crystals stabbed Lavina's eyes. She thought of the Indian captives. How could they ever stop wanting to go home? Father said that they forgot their own families and grew to love their captors. Lavina glanced sideways down the pew. Aunt Agnes stifled a cough in her handkerchief. Cousin Maud readjusted her ear trumpet. Aggie kicked the kneeling rest and received a look of reproof from her grandmother. "I forgot thee, O Jerusalem. Let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth." The rest of the psalm made Lavina feel stronger again, ready to fight like a brave Scot in one of Father's favorite poems. And meanwhile the church service moved grandly on. "Lift up your hearts. We lift them up unto the Lord." She liked this moment best, before they sank again into the long, long prayers like endless streets or weeks and months away from home. In February, after several weeks without a letter, Lavina received an envelope addressed in her oldest brother Tom's handwriting. "Dear Sis, we're all fine here except that Father has a bad place on his right hand where a thorn festered so he can't write. The alfalfa's growing well. After the flood, we didn't have to irrigate for a long time. Bill and John and I had an adventure. Went hunting with the hounds one night and followed the trail into what we thought was a deserted cabin. Well, it wasn't. The dogs started ki-yeeing, and then we heard men's voices and someone lit a lamp, and we saw a sea of dark, angry faces who ordered us to get out pronto. On the floor in the corner, we saw a stack of rifles and ammunition. It was a band of Yaqui Indians smuggling arms across the border for that guerrilla war they have going on with the Mexicans. You know how tough the Yaquis are. So we called our hounds out from under the Yaqui dogs, and we all hightailed it out of there. Bill said that the Yaquis were as glad to be rid of us as we were rid of the Yaquis. Other than that, no news. Yours, Tom." "Oh, an adventure, and I missed it," thought Lavina enviously, for she loved to go hunting with her brothers. Their father had taught them all how to shoot a .22 rifle, and sometimes they camped for a few days, which she also loved. They used to tell stories around the campfire and then fall asleep, each snug in a bedroll under the stars. How unfair that she must live in California and eat Jello with a silver spoon while Cousin Maud corrected her grammar. Her brother's adventure was just like the tale of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, except that the treasure was rifles, not gold, and fortunately nobody was murdered. And Shahrazade's stories, people seem to lose their heads with great frequency. But of course, the subject was on her mind, thought Lavina. It was the last story of the Arabian Nights that Lavina finally discovered a name for her doll. The Princess Perizade, who lived with her two older brothers, craved three magical possessions: the talking bird, the golden water, and the singing tree. To find these treasures for the brothers climbed a mountain littered with black stones. But as they climbed, they heard threatening voices speaking out of thin air, and when they turned to flee, they too became big black stones. Like the Cerro Prieto, thought Lavina. That was the dark rocky hill behind the ranch. There were no voices on the cerro except for the gabble of quail, but there were dangers. Leaning forward, Lavina gripped her pony for dear life with her knees. She dodged the black rocks, the cactus, and the thorny, tangled mesquites that snatched at her hat, clawed her face, ripped her riding skirt. Then it was too steep to ride. She had to get off and leave Chummy if she wanted to reach the top of the hill. She sighed and turned back to her old red book. So Princess Perizade went alone, but first she cleverly stuffed her ears with cotton, and then, ignoring the terrible voices, she succeeded in climbing the mountain. She never looked behind her till she reached the summit. There she discovered the talking bird, who told her how to fill a silver flask with the golden water and pluck a twig of the singing tree. "That is not enough," said Princess Perizade. "I must also rescue my brothers." Finally, reluctantly, the talking bird revealed that the golden water would break the spell. So the princess walked down the mountain, carrying the bird cage, the twig, and the flask with which she sprinkled every black rock she saw. Instantly, each rock became a man again, all adventurers who had failed to climb the mountain. And at last she found her brothers and released them from the evil spell, and they all lived happily ever after. From the top of the Cerro Prieto, Lavina could see the Santa Cruz Valley, with the river at the bottom shining through the lush green trees and fields, and the different duller gleam of the tin roof on her father's house. Then at a distance the brown hills began, and the next rows were reddish mountains, then purple, and finally, at a very great distance, pale blue. The top was Lavina's magic place, where Esmeralda the monster visited her. She called the place La Cima, the summit. Up there, while Chummy waited patiently, Lavina rested, drank from her canteen, and felt like a queen. Lavina-landia was all around her. "I will name you Princess Perizade," Lavina told her doll. "But that is your magic name, and we are the only ones who know it." That was chapter 13. Tomorrow we will read chapter 14, Chinatown, and this is where Lavina takes a trip into San Francisco to go to Chinatown with her family. So I think some of you have probably been to Chinatown before, so that'll be an exciting chapter. Hope you enjoyed this. Have a wonderful day.